Rick jolted upright as if someone had just poured cold water down his neck. The chair toppled backward, crashing onto the floor with a desperate thud. "I can explain," he cried, his voice starting to crack. He raised both hands as if trying to grasp something slipping away. I was just being strict. They misunderstood me. I didn't mean—" "You will not speak to any of the staff again," Quinn cut in, his voice calm, no need to raise it. He no longer looked at Rick as a rival, but as someone whose true face had finally been revealed. "Effective immediately, you are suspended. Permanently." Rick took half a step back, his face drained of color, back nearly pressed against the wall. There was no anger in his eyes now, no defiance, only fear. The kind of fear that grips a man who once believed himself untouchable, now realizing no one is immune to consequences. "I've called HR," Quinn continued slowly. "They'll be in touch to proceed with the necessary steps. Everything will be handled by the book." He paused, his gaze sharp as a blade. "And as for me, I'll make sure there's no place left for you in this industry." Rick stood there, silent. In that moment he was no longer the restaurant director who once made every employee avert their eyes in fear. He was just a man who had lost the mask of power and had no idea who he was without it. On a Friday night like any other, Quinn Carter stepped into his own restaurant, the Emberlight, a fine dining establishment nestled in the heart of Los Angeles. No flashing lights, no manager waiting at the door, no grand entrances. Just a man in a hoodie and jeans, striding quietly through the glass doors like any other ordinary guest. That was how Quinn chose to truly understand the place he had poured his heart into, silently observing from within. No fame, no authority. That evening the restaurant was packed. The clinking of silverware, the swift footsteps of servers weaving through tables, and the rich aroma of seared garlic butter and grilled ribeye filled the air. Under the soft golden light, everything appeared perfect. But Quinn had been in the industry long enough not to trust perfection. He knew a restaurant's true character didn't show in the number of dishes served. It lived in the quiet sighs in the break room, the anxious glances exchanged behind kitchen doors, and the hidden tears behind a server's smile. Then, as he passed the hallway leading to the kitchen, a faint sound made him stop. A soft, stifled sob. No one saw him pause, but his heart sank. It wasn't the loud crying of exhaustion, it was the sound of someone breaking and not allowed to fall apart. Quinn turned toward the staff lounge. The door was ajar. Through the crack he saw a young woman gripping the edge of a metal table, clinging to the last thread of herself to keep from collapse. Beside her was another staff member, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He didn't know her name, but he knew that expression, resignation in her face, emptiness in her eyes, lips pressed tightly together to hold back the tears. Something was deeply wrong, and he couldn't just walk away when someone had to cry in secret in his restaurant. Quinn didn't enter the room. Instead, he returned to the bar, took a seat on one of the tall stools, and ordered a glass of water. He needed to watch, to listen as just another guest. From his vantage point, he spotted the evening shift manager, a tall man in a blue button-up shirt, arms folded across his chest, scanning the floor like a predator surveying his domain. There was something about the man's posture that sent a chill down Quinn's spine. Not discipline, but control. The faint sound of the sobs still drifted from the break room. The young man, Quinn guessed his name was Ethan, whispered, "You can't let him do this. He doesn't own you." And then the girl's voice cracked, raw and desperate. "What choice do I have? He made it clear. If I don't go along, I'm fired." Quinn tightened his grip on the glass. This wasn't a matter between staff and customers. This was internal. A threat from above, structured, sanctioned by power. This time he wouldn't stay on the sidelines, eyes in fear. He was just a man who had lost the mask of power and had no idea who he was without it. After sitting quietly at the bar for a while, Quinn Carter set down his glass of water and stood up. He couldn't just sit and watch. If he wanted the full picture, he had to get closer to the people involved. But not the girl. Not now. She was at the edge, and one wrong word, one misplaced glance could push her deeper into fear. Quinn needed someone who could speak. The voice he'd heard, Ethan. He scanned the room and spotted the young man back on the floor, order pad in hand, steps awkward and uncertain. Quinn walked calmly toward the side station where Ethan was stacking plates. As he approached, he kept his voice low. "Excuse me, could I borrow a pen?" Ethan looked up, a little startled, but when he saw a plain, middle-aged man in a hoodie, his eyes relaxed. Yes, here." He handed him a pen, but Quinn didn't walk away. He glanced at the small name tag on Ethan's shirt. Just as expected, Quinn's voice was calm, friendly, but edged with seriousness. "Ethan, I saw the girl in the staff lounge. Is something wrong? She didn't look okay." Ethan froze. His fingers clenched around the plates, jaw tightening. "Shh, fine," he said too quickly, like someone trying to hide an open wound. Quinn leaned in just a bit, lowering his voice even more. "I heard part of it. You don't need to say everything, but if she's being threatened, I need to know. This is my restaurant." Ethan paused. His eyes flicked toward the far end of the dining room, where the manager in the blue shirt, Rick Callahan, stood at an angle, eyes scanning the space like a predator surveying its territory. Ethan lowered his gaze and whispered, "You don't get it. He can get someone fired with just a word. She's tried to quit before, but she needs the money. Her family depends on that paycheck." Quinn's hand tightened around the pen. He knew the type, men like Rick Callahan, who knew how to find the soft spots and twist them, slow and deliberate, until people forgot how to stand up straight. "What does he do?" Quinn asked, eyes locked on Ethan. Ethan swallowed hard. "Calls her into the office, keeps her after hours. No one knows what happens in there, but every time she comes out, she looks drained, like she's lost all her air." The atmosphere around them suddenly shifted. Rick Callahan was approaching. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was smooth, wrapped in civility, like a blade sheathed in velvet. Ethan's head dropped immediately. "No, sir, just helping a guest." Quinn turned, meeting Rick's eyes for the first time. The man didn't look hostile, but there was arrogance carved into every line of his face. His name tag read, Rick Callahan, Operations Manager. Quinn returned the pen with a polite smile. "Just needed a pen. Ethan's been great." Rick nodded and patted Ethan's shoulder. "Too firm to be friendly. Good. Stay focused. Don't get distracted." Then he turned and walked away, but not before giving Quinn a look, the kind you give a face you're filing away for later. Once Rick disappeared behind the host stand, Quinn let out a slow breath. He backed toward the main doors as if heading outside to take a phone call, but his mind was already moving, step by step. He knew exactly who Rick Callahan was, not just harsh but dangerous, and the girl, still nameless to him, was trapped in a system she couldn't escape from without someone who was willing to stop, to notice, to act. Quinn looked up at the glowing sign above the entrance, the ember light, burning bright against the night. His chest tightened. "Not in my restaurant, not under my name." He pulled the hood of his sweatshirt a little lower and stepped back inside, and this time he wasn't a guest anymore. After sitting still at the bar for a while, Quinn Carter set down his glass of water and stood up. He couldn't just sit and watch forever. If he wanted to truly understand, he had to get closer to the people involved, but not the girl, not now. She was at a breaking point, and one wrong question, one misjudged glance, could be enough to make her retreat deeper into fear. Quinn needed someone who could speak, the voice he'd heard. "Ethan." He scanned the room and saw the young man back on the floor, holding an order pad, his steps awkward. Quinn walked slowly toward the side station where Ethan was stacking plates. As he approached, he lowered his voice. "Excuse me, could I borrow a pen?" Ethan looked up, slightly startled, but when he saw a middle-aged customer in plain clothes, his eyes softened. Yes, here." He handed him a ballpoint pen, but Quinn didn't leave right away. He glanced down at the small name tag pinned to the shirt, just as expected, Ethan. Quinn kept his tone even, friendly yet serious enough. "Ethan, I happened to see the girl in the break room. Is something going on? She didn't look okay." Ethan stiffened. His grip on the stack of plates tightened, his jaw twitched. "She's fine," he said, too fast, too rehearsed, like someone covering up a fresh wound. Quinn tilted his head slightly, voice even lower. "I heard part of the conversation. You don't need to explain everything, but if she's being threatened, I need to know. This is my restaurant." Ethan froze. His eyes flicked toward the far end of the dining room, where the man in the blue dress shirt, Rick Callahan, stood, half-turned, scanning the room like a cat alert to every sound in its territory. Ethan looked down and murmured, "You don't understand. He can get someone fired with just a word. She's tried to quit more than once, but she needs the money. Her family depends on her paycheck." Quinn tightened his grip on the pen. He'd seen men like Rick Callahan before. Those with just enough power who knew exactly where your weakness lay and how to twist it to keep control. "What does he do?" Quinn asked, his eyes never leaving Ethan. Ethan swallowed hard. "Calls her into the office, keeps her after hours. No one knows what happens inside, but every time she walks out, she's pale, like she's lost all her breath." At that moment, the air between them froze. Rick Callahan was walking over. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was smooth, but it had the sharpness of a blade wrapped in velvet. Ethan immediately lowered his head. "No, just helping a guest, sir." Quinn turned to face Rick for the first time. The man didn't look angry, but his eyes brimmed with smugness. His name tag read, Rick Callahan, Operations Manager? Quinn gave a polite smile and handed the pen back. "Just borrowing a pen." "Ethan's been very helpful," Rick nodded and patted Ethan on the shoulder. "Too hard to be considered friendly." "Good. Focus on your work. Don't get distracted." Then he turned away, but not before giving Quinn a long, measuring glance, the kind you give someone whose face you intend to remember. Once Rick disappeared behind the host stand, Quinn exhaled slowly. He stepped back toward the entrance, as if heading outside to take a phone call, but in his head the next moves were already lining up. He knew what kind of manager Rick Callahan was, not just cruel, but dangerous. And that girl, still nameless to him, was trapped in a machine she couldn't escape unless someone stopped and stood still for her. Quinn looked up at the ember light sign shining over the awning. His chest tightened. "Not in my restaurant, not under my name." He pulled the hood of his sweatshirt a little lower and stepped back inside. And this time, he wasn't a customer anymore. After returning to the restaurant, Quinn Carter didn't walk back into the center of the dining room. Instead, he circled around the hallway leading to the kitchen, where the staff break rooms were located. The corridor lights were dim, and the glow from the kitchen reflected off the white walls as staff bustled back and forth. But no one paid attention to the man in the hoodie, quietly standing behind a column. From where he was, Quinn could hear the clatter of pans, the call-outs for orders, and the heavy breathing of a team surviving a packed night. Then came another sound, hurried footsteps, and a familiar hushed voice. The bartender named Nate, who had served Quinn earlier, had just left the kitchen, heading toward the back exit. Quinn followed immediately. As Nate stepped outside for a quick smoke break, Quinn appeared beside him and spoke softly. "Mind if I ask you something?" Nate jumped slightly, then recognized the man from earlier and exhaled, "Oh, it's you." Quinn leaned casually against the wall, hands in his hoodie pockets. "Just one question, about Rick Callahan." Nate hesitated, glanced around, and lowered his voice. "You're not a reporter, are you?" Quinn shook his head, meeting his eyes. "I'm someone who cares about the people working here, and I have reason to believe something's not right." Nate wetted his lips and after a few seconds of internal struggle finally let out a breath. He keeps Emily, the girl crying in the break room, late, alone, almost every night after the late shift. Her name had a face now. Emily. Just her? Quinn asked, keeping his tone level. "Yeah. And he never gives her extra work. Just tells her to go to the office. Door closed, no one knows what happens, but every time she comes out, she looks like someone who had her soul wrung out. Quinn clenched his fist. This wasn't just a feeling anymore. This was confirmation. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't tough management. This was exploitation, psychological abuse. Has Emily ever said anything? He asked. Nothing direct, but once I heard her tell Ethan, if I don't do what he said I'd lose my job. I don't have a choice. That was all Quinn needed. He'd seen too many men like Rick in the entertainment industry. Men who knew exactly how to pick their prey, pick their moment, and build entire systems around themselves for protection. Nate stubbed out his cigarette, voice low. What are you going to do? Quinn looked at the young bartender. His eyes were no longer gentle. They were sharp, cold, resolute. I'm not letting this continue, and I'm starting right now. He stepped back inside the restaurant, where the warm lights could no longer cover the rot beneath. He walked past tables, past laughter and conversation, straight to the service area. Emily was there, speaking to a customer, her face stiff like a mask. Quinn stopped a few steps away. He spoke just loud enough for her to hear. Emily, I need a word, right now. She flinched. Customers and staff turned to look. The woman she was serving frowned. She's helping me. Just a minute, it's important, Quinn said, his eyes locked on Emily. She hesitated, then she put the tray down, apologized, and followed him. She stood still, avoiding his gaze. I don't understand. I know what's happening, he interrupted. I don't need you to confirm it. I just want you to know. You're not alone. Emily held her breath. Her eyes widened. Then she blinked quickly, trying to hide the tear about to fall. I can't, she whispered, shaking. You can and you will. I'm here. I won't let him lay a hand on anyone again. But then, right at that moment, the familiar shadow loomed. Rick Callahan had seen them. He stood close, wearing a stiff smile. Is there a problem here? Quindon turned immediately. He was still watching Emily, watching the way her head lowered, shoulders drawing in like someone who had been forced small for too long. Then he turned to Rick, eyes sharp as a blade. Yes, and it has to do with you. Rick Callahan stood firm in front of Quinn and Emily, trying to maintain an air of civility, a faint smile, a calculating gaze. But under the restaurant's dim lighting, all Quinn saw was a man trembling behind the thin shell of control. She's on duty, Rick said, his voice light but loaded. Unless there's a legitimate reason, I'm afraid Miss Emily cannot leave her station. Quinn took a step forward, not a large one, but enough to place himself between Rick and Emily. His voice dropped, no longer gentle. I think the reason I'm standing here is more than legitimate. Rick raised an eyebrow, scrutinizing the man in the hoodie and jeans. He hadn't figured it out yet, but then something in his expression shifted. Quinn quietly pulled a wallet from his jacket and opened it. The restaurant ownership card gleamed under the bar's light. Rick Callahan froze, stepping back half a pace. I'm Quinn Carter. I didn't come here for dinner. I came here because I heard one of my employees crying in the staff lounge, Quinn said, each word crisp and deliberate. Nearby servers began to slow down. No one dared interrupt, but they all listened, and as they listened, the illusion of Rick's authority began to crack. Rick tried to recover. He swallowed hard. I apologize, Mr. Carter. If there's been any misunderstanding, I can assure you— Misunderstanding, Quinn cut in, his eyes as cold as steel. About forcing Emily to stay late alone? About the way you use silence and fear to control the staff? That's what you call a misunderstanding? Rick stammered, looking around, searching for a sympathetic face. There were none. Behind him, Nate, Tyler, and others had started to gather, not pushing forward, not speaking, just watching. Emily stood frozen, hands clenched in her apron, no longer able to hide the trembling. Quinn turned to her, his voice softening. You don't have to say anything right now, but you need to know you're not wrong, and he doesn't get to push you into the shadows ever again. Rick, losing his grip, snapped back. I've worked here for 3 years. I run a tight ship. This restaurant has always met its standards. If there's been any pressure, that's enough." Quinn's voice sliced through the room like a verdict. "Upstairs, now. We're going to have a talk, just the two of us." Rick hesitated, but he could see it clearly now. No one on the team was going to stand behind him. He nodded stiffly and turned away. Quinn turned to Emily. "Stay here. It won't take long." Emily nodded slightly, her eyes wide, for the first time not with fear, but with hope. Quinn followed Rick, cutting across the dining room, where every glance followed him like the path of a man stepping out of the shadows. Down the hallway toward the office, the noise faded behind them. No more chatter, no more movement, only the truth taking shape, step by step. The office door clicked shut behind Quinn and Rick. The small room, painted a pale gray, was lit by a cold white overhead light that fell harshly over the wooden desk. The same desk where Rick had sat countless times, signing orders, reviewing schedules, and manipulating people. Rick sat down first, trying to reclaim his old authority, but his shoulders had already sagged. Quinn didn't rush. He stood still for a moment, his gaze heavy as stone, then stepped up to the desk. He didn't sit, he didn't smile. He placed both hands on the tabletop and leaned in slightly, just 2 handspans away from Rick. "I want you to look me in the eye when I ask you this," he said, his voice hoarse but clear. "Who do you think you are in this place?" Rick blinked. He swallowed dryly. "I'm the appointed operations manager. I oversee efficiency. I maintain—" "No," Quinn cut in, his eyes locked on Rick's. "You don't manage anything. You manipulate, you threaten, you feed on fear." Rick gave a small shake of the head, about to object, but before he could speak, Quinn pulled his phone from his coat pocket. One tap on the screen, audio played, Emily's voice, brittle between 2 breaths. "If I don't do what he says," he said, "I'll lose my job. I don't have a choice." Then Tyler's voice, urgent and filled with quiet despair. "You can't let him control you like that, Emily. He doesn't own you." The dry recording echoed through the small room. Rick went pale. He sat frozen, like a man who just heard his own sentence read aloud. "I don't want to hear a single excuse," Quinn said, and now his voice held no trace of accusation, only finality, like a verdict already passed. "You had every chance to do the right thing. You chose fear. Now you lose everything." Rick shot to his feet in panic. "I can explain. I was just being firm. They misunderstood." "You will not speak to any of my staff again," Quinn interrupted. "Effective immediately, you are suspended. Permanently. I've already contacted HR. They'll be in touch. And as for me, I'll make sure there's no place left for you in this industry." Rick froze. He knew the game was over. Quinn turned and walked out. The phone still rested in his hand, but the audio had stopped. The office door swung open, and light from the front of the house spilled in like a quiet redemption. When Quinn returned to the staff, every voice in the restaurant fell silent. Emily stood there. Her shoulders still trembled, but her eyes were different now. No longer the eyes of someone trying to endure, but of someone who had finally seen a way out. Quinn looked at everyone. He didn't have to say much. His eyes said it all. "He's gone," he said simply. "You're safe." Emily exhaled, a breath that had waited far too long to be released, and Tyler, Nate, and the others stood still for a moment. Then came the applause, not loud, not dramatic, but full of quiet gratitude, a tribute to the man who did what they had thought impossible. And in that moment, in a restaurant still echoing with the elegance of dinner service, beneath warm lights and long-awaited relief, a reign of fear came to an end, not with fists, not with shouting, but with courage and integrity. On a Friday night like any other, Quinn Carter stepped into his own restaurant, the Emberlight, a fine dining establishment nestled in the heart of Los Angeles. No flashing lights, no manager at the door, no grand entrance. Just a man in a hoodie and jeans walking quietly through the glass doors like any ordinary guest. That was how Quinn chose to truly understand the place he had poured his soul into, by observing from within, without fame or authority. The Ember Light wasn't a business venture. It wasn't an image project. It was his life's work, nearly a decade spent assembling chefs, curating a menu, and creating a space where everyday people could dine beside celebrities, equal in dignity, united by the pleasure of a good meal. That night, the restaurant was packed. Silverware clinked, servers wove between tables, the air rich with the scent of seared garlic butter and grilled ribeye. Under soft golden light, everything looked perfect. But Quinn had been in this business too long to believe in appearances. He knew a restaurant's soul wasn't in how many dishes were served, but in the quiet sighs behind break-room doors, the anxious glances across the kitchen, and the tears hidden behind polite smiles. Then he heard it, a sound too faint for most, but too familiar for him to ignore, a stifled sob from the hallway near the staff lounge. He stopped. Through the narrow door crack he saw a young woman gripping the edge of a stainless steel table, as if clinging to the last of herself. Another staff member stood beside her, whispering, urgent, emptiness, silence, lips pressed tight to keep the pain inside. He didn't enter. Instead, he returned to the bar, sat down, and ordered a glass of water. He needed to watch, listen. From there, he spotted the evening shift manager, a tall man in a blue shirt, arms folded, scanning the room like a predator in its territory. Rick Callahan. Something in the man's stance chilled Quinn. Not professionalism, but control. The faint sounds from the break room drifted through. A young man, Ethan, Quinn guessed, whispered, "You can't let him do this, he doesn't own you." And then came the girl's cracked voice. "What choice do I have? He said if I don't do what he says, I'm fired." That was no misunderstanding, it was abuse of power. Quinn stood up. He approached Ethan by the side station and borrowed a pen. A small gesture, but one that opened a door. "I saw the girl in the lounge," he said gently. "Is something wrong?" Ethan froze. "She's fine," he said too quickly. Quinn leaned in. "I heard enough. If she's being threatened, I need to know. This is my restaurant." Ethan hesitated, glancing toward Rick, who now stood watching them. "You get it," Ethan murmured. "He keeps her late, alone. No one knows what he does, but every time she comes out, she looks like she's been crushed from the inside." That was all Quinn needed. He followed a second lead, Nate, the bartender, and found him outside on break. "What do you know about Rick Callahan?" he asked. Nate sighed. "He calls Emily, that's her name, into his office after every night shift. No work, just behind closed doors. She comes out looking hollow. She once told Ethan, if I don't do what he says, he'll fire me." Quinn nodded. "I'm not letting this continue." Back inside, Quinn walked straight to Emily, who was still working. "Emily," he said, loud enough to be heard, "I need to speak with you right now." She froze. Everyone looked. "She's helping me," a customer protested. "Just 1 minute, it's important," Quinn said. Emily hesitated, then followed him. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I know what's going on," he said. "I don't need you to explain. I just want you to know you're not alone." Then came the shadow. Rick Callahan, smile thin, voice coated in velvet. "Is there a problem?" Quinn didn't turn. He looked at Emily, saw her shrink instinctively, and then faced Rick. "Yes, and it has to do with you." The office door clicked shut behind them. Rick sat first, trying to salvage authority, but he already looked small. Quinn remained standing, leaned in across the desk. "Look me in the eye," he said. "Who do you think you are in this place?" Rick stammered about being the operations manager. Quinn cut him off. "You don't manage. You manipulate. You threaten. You feed on fear." He took out his phone, played the audio. Emily's voice. "I don't have a choice." Tyler's voice. "He doesn't own you." Rick's face went white. "No excuses," Quinn said. "You had your chance. You used it to hurt people. Now you lose everything." Rick jumped up, panicked. "They misunderstood. I was just firm. You will not speak to my staff again. Effective immediately, you're suspended. Permanently. HR will be in touch, and I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." Rick froze. He knew. It was over. Quinn stepped out. Every voice in the restaurant went quiet. He found Emily still trembling, but her eyes different now, not crushed, but awakened. "He's gone," Quinn said simply. "You're safe." She exhaled. Tyler, Nate, others began to clap, not loud, not dramatic, but honest, a quiet tribute to something once thought impossible. And so, in that elegant restaurant, beneath the glow of warm lights and the hush of softened breaths, a reign of fear ended. Not with fists, not with noise, but with courage and integrity. Later, in the break room, Quinn faced his team. "Tonight was a shock," he said, "but it wasn't a breakdown. It was a beginning." He spoke of why he opened the restaurant, not for profit, but to build something human. He admitted his failure. The system let Rick thrive. "That's on me." Emily asked, "What happens next?" "What happens next, we decide together." Emily stepped forward. "I just don't want anyone else to go through what I did." "And that's why," Quinn replied, "you'll be the first member of our internal advisory group. From today, anonymous reporting, third-party oversight, free mental health support." There were no cheers, but in their eyes there was trust. Tyler smiled faintly. "So we have a voice." "Not just a voice," Quinn said. "A say. Sounds like a revolution," Nate joked. "Not a revolution," Quinn smiled. "Just fixing a broken system." The team slowly filed out, lighter, freer, hopeful. Emily passed Quinn. "Thank you for not walking away." He met her eyes. "I'm not just standing here for you. I'm here for everyone like you, past, present, and future." She nodded, smiled softly, and disappeared into the Los Angeles night. Quinn stayed behind, the hum of the kitchen and the sweep of brooms the only sounds left. He sat down and closed his eyes. This wasn't a victory. It was a new beginning. Quinn stood in the break room, where every eye had turned toward him. He was no longer the owner behind the scenes. He was now the center of a fragile, flickering trust that had just been lit, a trust that felt delicate but disarmingly real. Emily was still frozen in place, tears welling in her eyes, but her gaze was sharp and clear. For the first time in months, she didn't feel small. She no longer felt like someone shoved into a corner with no escape. Quinn gave her a gentle nod, a wordless greeting, then turned to face the entire team. "I know tonight was a shock," he said, his voice steady, low. "But what just happened is not a breakdown, it's a beginning." No one spoke, but the room held its breath. "I didn't build this restaurant to become a money-making machine. I built it to be a place where people, regardless of background, experience, or circumstance, are treated with dignity." Nate, the young bartender, gave a small nod. Tyler clutched a towel quietly in his hand. "What Rick did is unforgivable," Quinn continued, "but the fault doesn't rest on one person alone. A system allowed him to exist, and that's on me." A silence followed, not of discomfort, but of respect. The unexpected truth of his words cut deeper than blame ever could. The staff exchanged looks. There was surprise in their eyes, yes, but also something more, something like admiration. Then Emily's voice broke the silence, fragile but resolute. "So, what happens next?" Quinn turned to her, then scanned every face in the room, faces marked by fatigue and now the faint glimmer of anticipation. "What happens next," he said, "is something we decide together." The room seemed to still, as if bracing itself for a shift. Emily stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "I just want no one to feel what I felt. No one should have to stay silent because they're scared." A slow smile formed on Quinn's face. "That's why you'll be the first member of our new internal advisory team. Starting today, we're implementing an anonymous reporting system, independent oversight of management, and free psychological support for every employee here." This time there was no applause, but in their eyes there was trust, a trust that had once vanished. Now, cautiously, it was beginning to return. Tyler gave a quiet laugh. "So, we actually have a voice now?" "Not just a voice," Quinn replied. "A say." Nate leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, his tone half joking. "Sounds like a revolution, boss." "No revolution," Quinn said with a grin. just fixing a broken system. When the meeting ended, the team began to leave, not in silence, not under the weight of resignation, but in quiet steps that carried something new. Hope. They left in pairs, in small groups, no longer afraid. Emily walked past Quinn and paused for a second. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not walking away." Quinn met her eyes, warm and steady. "I'm not standing here just for you," he replied. "I'm standing here for everyone like you, past, present, and future." She nodded, a small, honest smile forming, then turned and stepped out into the Los Angeles night. Quinn stayed behind, alone now in the room where only the faint clatter from the kitchen and the soft brush of a broom remained. He sat down in one of the chairs and closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't a victory. This was a new beginning. 2 weeks later, the evening at Torque's carried a very different air. There was no trace of Rick Callahan, no more fearful glances among the staff. In their place were soft laughter, the clinking of cutlery, and words of thanks exchanged between servers and guests. Emily stood at the bar, a menu in hand, her expression calm, but inside her everything was shifting. As if a long, heavy chapter had finally been turned. Rick Callahan had been charged. After Quinn submitted the full documentation, including audio recordings, witness testimonies, and Emily's statement, Torque's legal team officially contacted the police. A formal investigation was launched, and Rick wasn't just fired, he now faced allegations of harassment and abuse of power in the workplace. But for Quinn, that wasn't enough. In the main office of the Torque's restaurant group, he hosted a virtual meeting with every branch manager. For the first time since the chain's founding, they listened to a speech that wasn't about sales figures. "We can serve the finest meals and pour the most expensive wine," Quinn said, "but if our staff don't feel safe walking into the kitchen, then all of it is just a hollow performance." On screen, the manager's expressions shifted. Some nodded. Others avoided his gaze. But the message was clear. Starting next week, every location will undergo internal audits, have access to an independent whistleblower line, and follow a new code of ethics. Not just for employees, but for managers too. The meeting ended in silence, the kind of silence needed for something to sink in. That evening, Quinn returned to Torque's not to check up, but to sit down for dinner as a regular guest. Emily served the table, this time without lowering her head, without shrinking her presence. When she brought the dish over, she paused for a moment. "Thank you, Quinn," she said, meeting his eyes, "not just for believing me, but for not looking away." Quinn smiled gently, not the smile of a hero, but of someone who had once stood on the other side, someone who knew that the quietest battles are often the ones that demand the greatest courage. "You saved yourself," he said. "I just opened the door." That night after his meal, Quinn stepped out of Torque's. He looked back at the restaurant, the lights glowing through the glass, staff laughing inside, a new kind of family beginning to take shape. In his hand was a report, Workplace Climate Assessment National Network. The first line read, "No one should go to work carrying the weight of fear." He knew there were still places like Torque's had once been, but he also knew that it only took one person to begin, and those places would never keep their darkness forever.